Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today we'll start this Bava Metzia, daf Sadi Beis. We're going to begin on Sadi Beis and Alf by the new Mishnah. Says the Masnis. Oichel poyel kishus afil bedinner. The person who is working in the field, we said, is allowed to eat those foods while he's working. He can eat these cucumbers. Apparently they're expensive, even if they were dinner, which potentially could mean even if it's more than his work. He actually is eating more than what he's producing. For that matter, koseves, he could eat a date v'fil b'dinner, again, even if it's more than his wages. Rabbi Lezer chisma, which sounds like sachsoin, oimer lo yoichel poyel yeser al sechara. No, you cannot eat more than you're working. So if you're producing $10 of benefit for the worker, you can't eat more than that. Because otherwise, what's the point of hiring you? The Chacham said it's okay. He can still work. We don't want this person to be like someone who just eats a tremendous amount of it. No one's going to hire you. So if you end up just eating like crazy, and because of that, you just end up eating more than you're actually producing, no one's going to hire you again. But the truth is, we're not going to say you can't do it, but it's just not a smart thing. So therefore, we tell you to calm down and eat a little bit less. Says the Gemara. So Chachamim Hanatanakam. Chayre says the same thing. So you can there's a couple answers. One is Abel Malamdan. Do we actually tell him that maybe you should not eat as much? So Tanakam Aleisli Malamdan Rabbanan Islu Malamdan. So the machlokes whether or not you try to instruct him, maybe you shouldn't eat so much. If you eat too much, no one's going to hire you. Yiboy say, alternatively, Ika b'nayu, the nafkamina could be the Rav Asi. The Rav Asi, afil scharo el livtsar eshkol echad oichloi. If let's say you're hired and your whole purpose was just to remove one cluster of grapes, so you can eat them, even though you're going to end up basically causing the Baal Ma'aseh not to have anything. So you're still allowed to. Remember, if all you did was remove one cluster, oichlo, he could eat it. So what exactly is the difference between loy afilu sachrai or afilu batzer el eshkol echad? So what's the difference between these two languages? It sounds like the same thing, basically. You're allowed to eat them, even though that's the only thing that's there. So the first statement that if you're only hired to harvest one cluster, you could eat it, because there's no more clusters left. So there's just nothing. There's nothing left. If let's say there is stuff to put into the kli, maybe you should put it in first. Then you could eat. In other words, if there's nothing else, so of course that's what you could eat. But if let's say there is others, so maybe you should put the food in first and then eat afterwards. So it comes telling you that no, you can eat basically right away. Over there, it's possible you could wait till the end. So look at Rashi. This is the nafkamina, the machlokas. A worker who eats these cucumbers, shehilavada, just that. There's nothing else. If I feel he shove a dinner, you shouldn't eat more than its amount. The second group of the Rabbanan say, you can actually eat more. If let's say you're being paid for the day. If all you're doing is being hired to remove these cucumbers, then you're not allowed to. So it's a machlokas whether you hold a gravasi if your whole instruction is only to remove this one thing if you can eat it. Even we say a third possible nafkamina, Rav. You have a Rav Matzos Megillah Sarim that we found in these scrolls of a Rabbi Chia v'Kasaba Isim in Yehuda Omer. It says that based on the pasuk Yisava b'Kerem Reyacha Bavias Kol Adam v'Kasaba Daber. It's a pretty unbelievable thing that when it comes to going into this person's field, it means that even if he isn't hired for him, he could still go into the field, work, and eat, which means there's a tremendous point. that's being allowed. I understand, how could he allow such a thing? That people can just go into other people's fields even if they're not being hired and start eating? It was explained to me, and Dilma, maybe the statement of Isi is basically while they're working, they'll eat. So maybe that's what it's talking about. Says Rashi. So let's continue. So even if that's the truth, that they're working, better that you should hire your own workers. The niktefe lepardese, let them go and take stuff from your own vineyard. That we should just allow anyone who wants to come and do this. Says Rashi. It says your worker. He actually holds that anyone can do it, even if it's not your worker. So you can even eat more than what you're being paid. Because even this guy, who's not even your hired worker, could eat. Okay. Now the Gemara asks a different question. The fact that we allow this person to eat food, is it because it's like part of his wages, so like one of his benefits, so he's able to get paid, and he also gets this extra benefit from the Torah that he is able to eat? Or is it Mishal Shemaim Hoichel? Says Rashi, what does that mean? It's like Matanas Gemos Chasadim Kishar Matnois Aniyim. It's like a gift, like giving gifts to the poor. This is like a gift that Hashem creates for these people, but it's not tied to his work. So my nafkamina, Diaimer, if he says Tanula Ishtu Vanai, he says, I'm not going to eat, even though I'm entitled to eat, but instead let the food that I would be eating, let my wife and kids eat. So if it's yours as part of your wages, you can give your wages to your wife and kids, so you can give the food that is part of your wages to your wife and kids. Now, when it comes to this matana for the worker, so maybe it's earmarked only to him. So maybe, if again he didn't eat the fruits, could he let his wife eat the fruits? So again, it's dependent on whether it's a gift from Hashem, and therefore he would not be able to gift it to his children or wife, or it's considered to be like his, part of his wages. Tashma. So what did our Mishnah say? Our Mishnah said that a person is allowed to eat these expensive cucumbers if he'll be dinner, even if it's again a significant amount, even more than his wages. Koiseves, he could eat a date if he'll be dinner again. So if you want to tell me this is like part of his wages, then oiger bedanka achal bezuzah. So even though he's only working a danka, so nonetheless, where he's eating a zuz. Says Rashi, achal bezuzah bitmia. It's hard to understand. That can't be the case, because this is part of his wages. So how can it be that this little perk of him being able to eat is worth more than his actual labor? It must be the fact that he's allowed to eat more is just because it's a gift from Hashem. So if that's the case, so Eiger Bedanka Achel Bezuzah, again, it seems like the same problem. Like, why would he be allowed to eat more than it's worth? It's not a raya. It's just that this is a schus that possibly that the Torah says you can eat more than your amount, even though it doesn't seem logical. Tashma. He says no. You can't work. You can't eat more than what you're getting paid for. The Chachamim disagreed and allowed it. And again, we had these opinions. What exactly is this machlokas from the Chachamim and Tanakama? Maybe this is the whole machlokas, that whether or not you're allowed or not allowed to eat more than the amount is totally on this machlokas of, is this considered to be part of your wages or it's a gift from Hashem? Look, the maybe both hold that it's actually part of your wages. Bahacha B'kenafshecha k'mefagi. Here it's a machlokas in how we interpret the pasuk of Yechalta kenafshecha. You eat according to your desire. Marsaver kenafshecha b'davar shemaiser nafsho alav. This is referring to a person's wages. Marsaver kenafshecha ma nafshecha im chasamtum poter apoyel im chasamtum poter. So it's not limited, therefore, to the amount of wages. Says Rashi, Yechalta kenafshecha b'davar shata maiser nafshecha alav la'alois b'kevesh la'alois be'ilan. Like you're really risking your life climbing up ramps or climbing up trees. So therefore you can eat up until this amount because you're putting yourself at risk. So that is what it means, why it's called kanafshecha. It's like your mom is putting your life in danger. These are very dangerous jobs. So therefore, because you're meiser nafshai, so that's the reason why you can eat up until that amount. However, if you hold kanafshecha, could just mean that im chasamta poter av poil im chasamta poter, that if you are muzzled, you're poter, but it's not limited to any amount of wages. Tashma nazir she'omer tenu ishu avana. So nazir, of course, is not allowed to eat grapes. But let's say he's a worker and he says, "You know what? Give these grapes to my wife and kids." So ain't shaymin, they're not going to listen. The yamer b'shal oichel amayin shaymin loy. So it doesn't make sense. It must be that's min hashemayim, because if it's his, it's part of his wages, he should be entitled to give those wages to his wife and kids. And he says no. The problem, this is question 6 NTA 18, this is just a knas, that because he's engaged in working with grapes, like why? Why are you working with grapes? You're a nazir. The last thing you should be doing is hanging out with grapes. You may eat them, so therefore we knas you. Okay, let's look at question 6. Why should we listen to him? Either because it must be a raya mishal shemayim huaychel, it's not his to give to others, or because of leichlech hamin nazira, it's a kanas. Okay, weiter. Tashma. So we're still trying to understand the answers. Poyel she'amar, if a worker says tenu ishti, give it to my wife, uvanai, ein shaymin lo. So that seems to be pretty clear. It says you can't do it. Why not? It must be because it's shemayim. Now v'yamrit mishalo hoyichel, if it's taka his, right? If it's his, rather, amay ein shaymin lo. Understand? If it's actually his wages, he should be able to do it. So it must be. The fact that it says he can't, right? It must, because it's min hashemayim. So no my poil nazir. It's just talking about a nazir. I have a sign nazir, I have a sign poil. We already have in the case of nazir. Midi gabi hadadi taninan. They're not right next to each other. So it's talking about a nazir. Tashma. Again, maybe we'll say it's a nazir again. We'll see that a worker is not allowed to say, "Give it to my wife and kids." Shnemer el kel yechol latitin. So yachi mishum el kel yechol latitin is the whole issue, because you shouldn't put it into the vessels. Mishum leichlech amrin naziru has to do with the fact that he's a nazir in enachinami. Tiny lobeloshin poil kanatziv lakra de poil. So again, we're still saying that it's talking about a nazir. Okay. Actually, look at Rashi. Kanatziv lo gemara kra de poil loyum rabbananhi midrabbananhi ukra smak b'yalma. Toshma soichas a poil. You hire workers locked sois b'teinim to harvest figs. So Rashi says l'yavshem asada, they dry up in the field lasos katsios. So you end up like making them into clusters, into cakes. As we continue to study base on the base. Harizeh oichel. You're allowed to eat them at this time. Upatim in a meiser. At this time, because it's not gemar malacha, so it's still pater from meiser. We know once the produce has reached its final process, then it becomes chayv and meiser, which then would be a problem of you eating it. Al manash yoichel ani uvani, on condition that my wife and kids eat, my wife eat, that I eat, my children, or shoichel b'ni b'schari, for my wages, hu oichel pater. So he can eat it, he's potter. However, for them they'll be chayiv. Says Rashi, Hu oichel pater shatar zichsel loy koleket shechel peya shepeturim l'meiser. They said, because we're talking about this guy, so we said the Torah says lech shechel peya is allowed, so too he's allowed. It's not an issue of meiser. However, for his kid, he's chayiv in meiser. Dahavi loy kiloi keach. He's like a buyer, purchase of a mekach shel nigma mulachtoi. So at that point, as a lekech, the din is your chayiv in meiser. Understand, if it's really his, the man's, the poil, so then why is his child chayiv? It's like he's giving that which is his already. So the problem is that even though it's true that maybe the poil is the one who actually is the one who is zoichet to it because it's part of his wages, but it looks like a mekach. This is the reason why we're going to say the child has to be chayiv in meiser. Tashma, a poil. Person works last place ben neta Rabbi shaloi, and he's working with neta Rabbi. Now neta Rabbi, you're not allowed to eat until that's got to be brought to your shalayim. So hari elu yoichu. So we say that this guy, the poil, is not allowed to eat it because it's against the Torah. V'im lo hodiu. But let's say the worker was unaware that this was the case and he accepted the job thinking he was going to eat this stuff. So the owner needs to redeem and then he's allowed to eat. In other words, he's to be pointed onto money, and then that guy will bring the money to shalayim, like Meiser Sheni, and this way he'll be able to eat it. Now, if this is a gift from Hashem only, so now my poidim achilon. Why does he have to redeem it? The Torah just will not just say, I'm sorry, this is not a matana, because it's usher, it's not the Rabbi. So it must be a raya that it's really part of his wages. No. The problem is because otherwise it looks like the whole thing was a mekach. He accepted the job thinking that it was regular food, and it turns out to be a Rabbi, so therefore that's the reason why he has to do this, even though technically he doesn't have to. Ema Seifa. So what does it say later on? It says, Nisparsu igulav. Let's say the dates got disconnected. So he hired the workers to regather them. Or for that matter, Nispatchu chevyoisav. The barrels opened up. It's not allowed to eat them. Now, and again, if he didn't know that this was the case, meiser machilon. So again, the owner has to take off the meiser and then eat, and then he's allowed to eat them. Now, again, my meiser machilon. Why does he have to separate them and then he's allowed to eat them? You can say the same thing. You want to tell me the same answer? It looks like a bad sale. Now, Bishlam, I can understand the case of this parsui gulav, that if you have the situation where the dates got disconnected and now he has to reconnect them, so in that case it looks like a mechatais because again he didn't know this. Ella nispatchu chavyoisav. If let's say the barrels were open, why is it mechatais? Medi yada the itbul hu meiser. He obviously understands that it's considered to be tevel. He can see with his own eyes that it's an issue. So let's just look at Rashi. Shenitlu mikaviyosehen. Okay, so harilu yochlu. Okay, so nisparsu gulav ika mekatais. As Rashi Savurim, the worker thinks shezut chilas to risasan. This is the beginning process. He doesn't know. He doesn't realize because they were disconnected. He didn't realize that they were once connected, and therefore he doesn't think there was a gemar malacha, and therefore he'd be chayiv. It's chayiv and meiser, and therefore he can't eat them. So you can understand it's a mechatais. However, when it comes to an open barrel, what's the mechatos? He should obviously know it's chayiv and meiser. So Rav Sheshis, no, it's possible. We're talking about a case shenis patchu chavyoisav bor, that it was spilled back into the pit. So the worker thought that again there was no malach, gemar malach, and they could drink it. Vasanya. Let's look at Rashi. Shenish b'chol bor svurim hayu shlol hoitzihu misham, and never left there. Okay. Vasanya, we learn yayin mishiyeri labor, that it becomes chayiv and meiser. It's gemar malacha as soon as it goes down into the bor. So what do you mean? Even if he thinks it spilled back into the bor, it's still chayiv. Now, Karikiva the Yomer Mishiyikpeh. He actually holds It's only, Rashi says, only a later time when the peels rise up from the boar, then you take them out and stuff. So that's when it's considered Gemar Malacha, which means that even though it's in the boar, that's not considered Gemar Malacha. So the guy actually thought he was still able to drink it. Yermulei lo yaviyadin and didn't know. So Dilma mikapeh. Why don't we say that? Why would you even think it's a mechatos? Maybe you should have thought as a possibility that this is precisely what happened. That maybe the peels already rose up and it's already chayiv anyway. So ba'asra dahu gavra dinagid ihu mikapeh. This is in a city where the one who pours the wine, he also removes the peels, and therefore he felt that this was probably not done yet. So b'hashta detani Rav Zvid. Now that we learned of the din of Rav Zvid, b'debei Rabbi Ishia, the yain mishir labor vayikpeh, he says that in order to be Gemar Malacha, it has to go into the pour and the peels come out. He says, as Rashi, Mishanasan b'chaviyos, from the time it was given into barrels. So if you can even say the case was not that it was spilled back into the pit. I didn't know that it was taken off. So why didn't we say to this worker, maybe you should have figured out that maybe it was taken off? So the one who closes the barrel, he's the one that takes it off. Tashma. A person can make a stipulation himself, says Rashi, little mois v'yoichel. I'm only going to take money and I'm not going to eat any of the food. He can do this idea beno v'ito hagadolim. He can do this for himself, also for his older children. Beno v'ito hagadolim. If they're the ones that are working the field, you can make that deal that they're not going to eat. Your older servants, your wife, because they have das and they know exactly what you're doing, and even though they're working, they're going to be Michael. Don't worry, I'm not going to eat. You can't make this deal if your little kids are working the fields. Not again if the servants are young. Now your animals, they don't have das, and therefore they don't have the ability to be Michael. So the original halvim is b'mal lehen mezainis, that this man is obligated to provide food for his anyway, right? That we're providing food by this man, says Rashi. Uschar pulosin shaloi, and therefore because of that, he's obligated to feed them, and therefore the work is in his hands. He gets paid. He gets their masyadeha. Now, if you tell me the whole din is Mishal Shemayim, Mishum Hachenu Kaitzitz, that's the reason why he can't make this deal, because it's only for them and not for him. It says Rashi, Ali Abud of Katanim, the Ein HaPoyel Katan Suchus El Kishenaisel Toich Piv. He doesn't have any schus, only once it's in his mouth, that's when it's his. El Iyamr Bishalohu Eichel, if actually it's part of the salary, understand that's part of the salary, so he should be able to make this deal as well, because if he's feeding food to his children anyway, it's his deal, which means he gets the salary. So then if part of the salary is the food, so he should be able to make this deal also for katanim. We're talking about a situation where the father does not support them, and since the father does not support them, so therefore he doesn't really have a right to this stuff either. So Yahaki Gedolim Nami. Understand? So why is he able to make this stipulation for Gedolim? He's not supporting them. The Gedolim Yadei v'kamachle. Yeah, but there can be Michael anyway. V'atana Rabbi Ishia Kaitzitz Adam Alidi Atzma v'Alidi Ishto, that you could make this deal, the stipulation for yourself or your wife, of a lo alidi behemto, which is what you said, you can't do it for your animal. But then it says v'alidi beno v'ito hagadolim, only for the older, which is exactly what we said before. But then it says, interestingly enough, here it says that you could make this deal even if it's an evident shivcha who are katanim, who are young. But you know what we said before, avadim and shvacha and an evan and a shivcha, you cannot make the stipulation. So my law, it must be that both cases you're supposed to feed these katanim, avadim food, and therefore you're entitled to their wages. So then why can you make the stipulation? And therefore you're allowed to make the stipulation because the food is part of the wage. It's all yours. So if it's all yours, then l'chayra you should be able to make the stipulation. It's all totally on whether you're mal mezainis. If you're not mal mezainis, so then you can't do it. So b'mai ukimta. So how are we establishing this? B'mal mezainis, that you can feed them, you must feed them, so therefore you're entitled to their wages. So if it's his own kids, because he's feeding them, he should be able to make this deal. So the answer is the father doesn't have a right to do this to his own kids, only to avadim. He cannot cause his children this suffering. Okay. But my kimta the mastis is how we're establishing b'shen mal mezainis. And since ein mal mezainis, since you don't feed them, so therefore the wages and certainly their food, you don't have any rights to make the stipulation for. So continue studying Yom. So nichol man yirmer ein harav yochel loymel eved asimi ve'eno yizancha shaper. I can understand according to the opinion who says that a master cannot say that you work for me and I'm not going to give you any food. You can't make that statement, and therefore that's the reason why he has no rights to their food while they're working. Which is a pretty unbelievable thing, that you can say, you give me all your work and I'm not going to feed you. So then the question is, why doesn't it work in this situation as well? He should still have rights to their food. Really, both cases is where you don't support them. So you don't support them at all, so therefore you would think that you certainly should not have rights to be able to make the stipulation. The whole machlokas is based on this mandiyaimer, whether or not a Rav can say to his Eved, Asimi v'ni zancha. Rav Yochanan, according to Rav Yochanan, he says that Taka master could say, work for me and I will not feed you. So Shavik Masnisim Elvik Kabraisa, so Rav Yochanan is going against the Mishnah and going like the Braisa. El de Kuliyam Mishal Shemayim Oichel. Really, everyone holds this Mishal Shemayim. V'lo Matzi Kotzitz. And he's not allowed to make the stipulation. So my Kotzitz, the Yomi Rabbi, what does he mean? It means Mezainis. That's what it means. Says Rashi, Shitil him Mezainis, Mikar Harbe, you should give them a lot of food, Shol Yoichel Echel Min Anavim, so they won't be able to eat from the grapes. The Kavasi Gabe Behemto, same thing by the animals. Tevin Nekutz law, that you make a stipulation by giving them a lot of straw so they won't end up eating any of the food that while they're working. So again, it's possible that it can be totally on this machlokas. So we'll stop here, but let's maybe see another question. TA 18, we already saw Nazir Shaimer Tinul Ishti Vanai in Shaiman Lo Madua. So either we don't listen to him because Mishal Shemaim Hu Oichel, or because of Leichlech Amrin Nazira. Okay, no more questions for that. TV 19, Bamet Toli Hanidoin Im Kaitzitz Adam Lito Mois B'Makam Achilos Avadav Katanim. So what is the machlokas? If you're allowed to designate money, you're allowed to make this stipulation b'makam achilas avadim hakatanim, whether or not you could do this when it comes to avadim hakatanim. So one is, it's telling im mal nahem mezainis. I wrote three. There's really three answers here, but Sadi Beis Amid Beis Sadi Gimel Amid Aleph. So im mal nahem mezainis. So we said that could be one of the differences. Im yachal loimer asi avoda b'shvili v'ni zancha, I won't feed you. Or im yachal let's staris avadim And I would think the other answer should just be Mar Savar Mishlohu Oichel Mar Savar Mishlo Shemaim Oichel Adkan.